America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you live every Monday and Thursday. Monday, I do more of a relationship show that deals with kind of a holistic view of relationships, because not only do I want you to date well and, get lucky, I also want you to get married and stay married, and I don't want you to get divorced, right? So I have a holistic view of relationships. That means you have to agree on parenting and all of these other things. And on Thursday, I do a more politics show. This is going to be kind of a meet in the middle type of show, because the point of departure is going to be slightly political. I saw this tweet this weekend by Bethany Mandel. Mandel is, she's an American, a Jewish American woman who's big on the kind of homeschool kind of brigade, right? So she says, and she's I don't think I'm being offensive here when I say she's a pretty big Zionist. And she tweeted, "I don't want to be Jewish. They don't shoot non-Jews, my 4-year-old." So her 4-year-old says, "I don't want to be Jewish. They don't shoot non-Jews." And that's supposed to be offensive, because nothing in the world should make you not want to, take up the religion of your parents, if that religion of your parents is benign, right? So there's this idea that this is such a catastrophe, and the abuse leaks into her quality of parenting and spiritual life, such that even her 4-year-old is saying awful things about the religion of their family. The problem is, and I have 3 kids myself, all of whom are now over 4. And my kids were in daycare for a lot, but pretty much everything they know about global politics, they learned from me. So if her 4-year-old thinks that the world is coming after him because he's Jewish and is going to shoot him because he's Jewish, it's because she told him that. And like I said, my kids went to daycare. She homeschools her kids, which means she has complete control of the information. She told him to interpret the world, or anything that's going on in the world that gets to them, that they want to shoot Jews. They meaning anybody. And she's in New York, so it's not exactly, your Palestinian neighbors who are a large percentage of the population. No, this is a New York Jew teaching her kids that everybody who is not Jewish wants to shoot Jews, right? So that's a problem that you can only learn at home. So I charge Bethany with, they learned it from watching you, Mom. You're the one who's fear-mongering. But maybe it gives you a sense of relevance or a place in identity. I don't know. I'm just saying that that is not the fault. That particular lesson learned at 4 years old isn't the fault of something that happened half a world away. It's the fault of you interpreting something that happened half a world away for your kids, because pretty much at that age, and if you homeschool, everything they learn under your auspices, unless you're not really paying attention, unless you're falling down on the job. Right, so that's more about Bethany Mandel than it is about the situation in the world. But it actually segues nicely to what I wanted the topic of today to be. And I wanted to say the gift that a parent gives to their child. It's not the material that only a parent can give to a child. It's not the material goods and services, maybe, a very extensive and elaborate government could provide those goods and materials and services, even the service providers to administer them all. And what you give to a child isn't even ethical education, because if all parents did it was ethical education, you would think that would be ably delegated to a professional in ethical education. But no, it's not just an ethical education, and it's not just goods and services, although it often includes all those things. What parents give to children is a place in history, a way to interpret what they are and what they mean. And I've said this before, that I'm realizing with my kid, their last name means about as much to them as their first name, because I'm very clear about what it means to be an Osei-Frimpong. And that means how other people will treat you, and I'm sure Bethany Mandel is very clear about that, because her kids have a very clear understanding of how other people are going to treat them. And also how they are supposed to act in order to sustain our being as Osei-Frimpongs. Because Osei-Frimpongs are historical creatures. We emerged in history, and it's possible we will die out. But what it means to be one in this time is something that they get from their parents, because before they are anything else, they are family members immediately. Right? So before they understand themselves as anything else, they understand themselves as family members to this particular family. So what does it mean to be a family member of this particular family? That is very interesting. And that's full of content, at least in this family, and it should be full of content in your own family. Right? What does it mean to be an Osei-Frimpong? You should ask yourself, what does it mean to be a blank? What does it mean? And if you don't have enough content in that answer, it's possibly because you weren't parented correctly. I have a lot of respect for, kind of robust traditions like, Orthodox Judaism or the Mormons or even the Catholics, like robust traditions. At least they take this kind of question seriously, because parents tell you what it means to be who you are, because who you are is the same, like is immediately connected, immediately related to who they are, right? And infants don't know anything. Infants don't know anything except they're members of this particular family. Well, they don't even know that. But children don't know too much except they're members of this particular family. But what it means to be a member of this particular family actually ripples out into how this particular family relates to the world. So they know how to relate to the world as not an abstract individual, but as a member of this particular family. And if you don't have a robust content of what it means to relate to this world as your last name, not just your first name, then you relate to the world as just your last name, and you have an abstract relationship to the world, right? You deal with the world kind of empirically or logically, but both of them are not practical, right? You can deal with the world empirically because you don't know how the world, you just kind of look at how the world is and what seems to happen through constant conjunctions, through like, you do this and this happens. You don't know why it happens because there's no meaning there. You have to impose the meaning on the world because you didn't get the meaning from the parents. You didn't get like an interpretive frame from your parents. But you look at the world and you see that when X person says this, Y happens, and you just kind of figure out the world that way. But that's an unsteady way to be in the world. You don't have any grounding. You don't have any cultural mooring. You're just in the world empirically, and you're looking at the world as an outsider. And when I talked about this before, I say, imagine learning football, the game of football, empirically, where they just kind of drop you in, and every now and then you get hit, and every now and then the ball stops, and every now and then you get praised, but you don't actually have any understanding of the rules of the game. You don't know what anything means. You're just figuring out, you're writing your own rule book, but you're doing it empirically as opposed to actually through an intellectual understanding of the rules of the game. So that would be a problem. Or any game, baseball. Sometimes you get called out, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they want you to swing something, but like nobody actually explains to you the rules and the strike zone and like gives you a normative vision of what should happen and why things will make sense. So you don't know what anything means. You just know that sometimes X happens and sometimes Y happens. And there may or may not be a rhyme or reason, but you have to kind of impose your own onto the world because you didn't actually get a historical understanding of the world, so you just kind of deal with it kind of through empirical science. Right? So that's one exponent of a failure of parenting. Another way of failing of parenting is if you give, where parenting fails is if they have an idealized version of the world and they think it should happen the way, it should work the way that it's rational to work, right? Right? But the world is full of contradictions, and I did a whole episode on how part of what it is to be a lot of things is to be that contradiction. So you have to actually understand the contradictions in a practical way to understand the world. But if you have an overly idealized understanding of the world, you also are going to be, often frustrated about the real workings of the world because nobody's actually given you a historical sense of like the contradictions in the world. Some people will say this, but when they say this, they don't actually mean this. They have to say this in order to keep their job, but what they really mean is this. Those are things your parents tell you. And apparently, I suspect you could tell people who were raised with parents and people who were raised with not, because they're better at understanding like the practical workings of the world, raised with good parents versus those who were not raised with good parents. They're better at understanding the practical ways of the world because, oftentimes it's only parents. It's only someone with an immediate an immediately shared interest and doesn't really have a divergent interest, who says like, no, don't listen to what they say. What they say is going to be lying. It's not true. They have to say that in order to appease them, but about this thing. But they'll be honest with you about this thing. So you have to watch him here, don't watch him there, and like that kind of negotiation, like you get from a parent. You get away in the world, which is why it's not the worst thing in the world that some of these pro players have their parents as their pro athletes, have their parents as their manager. I think Neymar's dad manages him, and Mbappe's dad, I think, manages him. So like it's not an accident, because you could give kind of the individual activity, but someone needs to make sense of it for you, and you just go into the world working as a unit. I think maybe John Morant, you go into it working as a unit, which is perfectly appropriate. And that's what families can give. They can give an understanding, an intellectual understanding of the world that you're participating in. And you participate in it as a family member, but they give it to you having mapped out what being a family member in that particular family means to the rest of the world. Right? So it's a kind of an asymmetry in scope. You're working as a unit. One person sets the plan. The other person, it's kind of like field general versus private. Like you're all on the same team and you're working in concert. And one person sets the plan and the other person executes it. But only one person really knows what everything means. And that's what the parents have to kind of deliver on to the children. Because the idea is that parents and children are on the same team in a way, and it's a non-oppositional relationship. So you get your sense of community and who you are in a non-oppositional fashion, as opposed to the market relations in civil society, which are quasi-oppositional, right? And I talked before about how even in civil society, they presume you come from a certain kind of family. They don't want abstract individuals in certain, like every institution you participate in presumes that you were raised correctly. Except apparently Deion Sanders talked about how he likes defensive linemen who were raised incorrectly, because that way they were going to be a little bit more hungry for the ball. But what a family confers to children, and I think what family uniquely confers to children, is a place. A place. And having a place and understanding how that place interacts with other places is at least as important as an inheritance, a material inheritance. Because if you have a place, you won't blow the material inheritance, or you'll know how to spend it in the right way. If you have a place, you won't end up taking the wrong advice, because like you don't have too much materially, but like you have a place of who you are and who not to trust, and so you know who you are in this historical moment. Right, in a practical way, and how that relates you know who you are in this historical moment, and how that relates to other people who are other kind of particular, and who might not have your interest at heart. Right, so what parents give to children is a place in history, and then as a family member, you're also connected to other families and other spiritual traditions and other polities. So when you have a place as a family member, it's actually a robust identity, because it realizes your place of that family in other networks. And a kind of a subjective disposition that as long as you act in accordance to the rules of your family, the rest of the networks will make sense in a practical manner, right? And you can't just do this logically, because there are lots of contradictions in all of these other civil institutions. So you'll run up against like the hypocritic reality of, say, the Democratic Party or something like that, if you weren't well raised, right? I hope this has been clear. I hope you get serious about, in your parenting, understand, like conveying to your kid what it means to be, and insert your last name, what it means to be a part of this kind of particular kind of family, because nobody else can do that for your kid. And that's a very important variety of knowledge. By the way, if you appreciate what I do, which I think you should, because what I think I do is very important, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50. a month, and I will see you on Thursday with something completely different. But, like I said, if you take nothing else from this, what your kid gets from you is a place in history, not just the skills to realize it and act a certain way, but also an understanding of what it means to be who they are within this family. And then what it means to be an individual within that family, what it means to be an individual, like ripples out to what it means to be an individual in civil society and a political individual and all that other stuff. All right. Thank you for your time. I will talk to you on Thursday.